Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I am Deepika Mehto, and coming up in the next 30 minutes. Early voting begins in 26 of 50 US states. Both presidential candidates trade barbs over issues of economy and democracy. Israel pounds bomb at Beirut and Gaza after Hezbollah launched drone at Netanyahu's home. Israeli Prime Minister says attempt to assassinate him is their grave mistake. G7 holds first ever meeting dedicated to defence in Naples. Ministers back Ukraine NATO bid, raise concerns over UN peacekeepers' security in Lebanon. In sports, South Africa all set to face New Zealand in Dubai with an eye on historic T20 Women's Cricket World Cup trophy victory. A very good afternoon to all our viewers. Let's begin with elections first. With US presidential elections just 17 days ahead, early voting has started taking place in 26 states and more are going to begin soon. Out of those 26 states who initiated early voting on Saturday, Detroit, Michigan joined in. Nevada also began the same on Saturday, whereas Georgia, Pennsylvania and others have already started. In Nevada, people queued up at polling stations in an enthusiastic way. Las Vegas voters also joined and they raised their issues and expected their candidate should win.
Yeah, I voted for Donald Trump, and I think that he's the candidate that would, that is more likely to revive the economy, secure the border, make a real path to citizenship.
I just have to come out and vote for Kamala Harris, if that's okay to say. I just want peace, okay? I just want the values that she holds, okay, they're mine.
It's a big role. Nevada's kind of swing state. It goes back and forth. I think it's real important this year for me as a Republican. We need to swing it back to the red side.
Well, it's important to me to vote, and I always do early voting to make sure that I'm able to vote, because on voting day I have to work. So that's why early voting is important to me. An interesting part of that early voting is that it gears up the localities. Even the shopkeepers start to present their products in a way that enthuses the voters for their respective candidates. A bakery owner started selling Trump and Harris cakes in Michigan. For 40 years, a bakery in the Detroit suburb has been predicting the winner of the presidential election, selling blue and red chocolate chip cookies for Democrats and the Republican voters, respectively, with the names of the candidates written on it. Candidates too have geared up in big way and are giving razor edge to their attacks and rivals. In a rally at Detroit in Michigan, Kamala Harris hyped up the voters who are going for early voting. She told them not to lose chance. In the rally at Detroit, she urged especially the undecided voters by saying that Trump has no issues. She further tells the voters that the former US president and her rival is hardly telling anything about the economy will work or how he will generate employment. She further accused Donald Trump to be self-centric and talking about mythologies.
I keep talking about somebody needs to just watch his rallies if you're not really sure how to vote. Because he spends full time talking about himself and mythical characters. Hey, Detroit, are we ready? Because the power is with the people.
The Republican candidate Donald Trump, too, is not far behind in his attack on Kamala Harris, as he took on his rival in a very symbolic way. In his Pennsylvania rally, the former U.S. president and Republican candidate invoked the memory of golf legend Arnold Palmer. He talked about guns and democracy as well. He said Kamala Harris is a threat to democracy.
Kamala Harris, who shouldn't be there, she's a threat to democracy. The way they took over, they call me a threat to democracy, right? She's a threat to democracy because she shouldn't even be the candidate. They should have picked a candidate fairly, not just given her because they want to be politically correct. And they went back to the members' bag.
So as the race to the White House heats up, DD India is on an election trail to the United States. DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh is in New York and he scans through some of the prominent newspapers and takes us through the latest developments in the electoral landscape of the USA.
We are next to the iconic Brooklyn Bridge in New York. It happens to be a sunny day. Let's scan through what's appearing in the prominent newspapers about the US elections. Let's begin with the Wall Street Journal first. It is talking about in a battleground state of Michigan, the state of Detroit is an issue in itself. Well, the context of it is that Donald Trump had likened the city in his speech, recent speech, to a developing nation. And he had said that the whole country, America, would land up as Detroit if Kamala Harris is elected as president. Now, Kamala Harris's team has spun that around to her advantage, saying that it is like Donald Trump versus Detroit, that he had disrespected the people and the culture of Detroit. Donald Trump's team, of course, says that his words were taken out of context by Kamala Harris and that his remarks were directed at Detroit's lingering high crime and poverty rates. So that's interesting tussle centered around the state of Michigan. Next, let's turn to the New York Times. It's talking about the manner in which the North Carolinians are considering who will help them rebuild as early voting begins. Thursday was the day of early voting to begin. In North Carolina, the context of it is also the cyclone Helene and the devastation that it caused, scarred by the extraordinary amounts of rain that unleashed deadly flooding. The article says the road-crushing mudslides last month, the people of Western North Carolina are heading into the voting booths with the question in mind, which candidates will best help rebuild their communities and the impact of the worst natural disasters in the recent US history. Another article from the paper, it says Obama set to hit the trail alongside Harris next week. Former President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, will in fact make their first campaign appearance alongside Vice President Kamala Harris as she seeks to woo the voters in the last-ditch effort really in Georgia and Michigan. And finally, we're looking at the New York Post. There's an interesting editorial article, looks at the US elections from the context of foreign affairs. It says US election has the EU paralyzed but, and it sort of talks about the implications and all that is going on, especially in the context of the Ukraine conflict. It says that there is an odd sense of paralysis in Brussels, the capital of the European Union. Everyone is waiting for the US presidential elections to conclude and the confirmation hearing of new European Commission. So there is this sort of time gap with the new leadership to sort of take charge. It is going to be important for what's going on in Eastern Europe in particular as well. So those were some of the highlights of what has appeared in the newspapers here in New York talking about US elections. With camera person S. Jaishankar, Shubhendu Ghosh for DD India in New York.
Shifting focus, tensions in West Asia has been escalating since the elimination of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. In a recent attack, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Hezbollah of trying to assassinate him and his wife on Saturday. Calling the strike a grave mistake, Netanyahu, in a social media post, said that anyone who tries to harm Israel's citizens will pay a heavy price, quote unquote. Netanyahu's office said that a drone was launched towards his residence in the central town, but he and his wife were not home and there were no injuries. Meanwhile, Israel continues with its retaliatory attack on Hamas and Lebanon. Israel struck Beit Lahia town in northern Gaza on Saturday, hitting several houses and a multi-story residential building. Israel also carried out at least a dozen airstrikes on Beirut in the heaviest attack the Lebanese capital witnessed in more than a week. Huge plumes of smoke were seen rising over the city's southern suburbs where Hezbollah's main base is located. Whereas Israeli army soldiers Israeli army civilians ordered they were located in the neighborhood of Haret and Hadath in South Beirut to immediately evacuate on early Sunday. Issuing an urgent warning, Israel Defense Forces said that the military would work against them soon. Israel said that those civilians are located near facilities and interests affiliated with Hezbollah, which the IDF will work against in the near future. On to G7 now. Defense ministers from the world's 7 leading economies, the G7, gathered in Italy's Naples on Saturday. As per a joint statement issued after the G7 summit, the defense ministers said that they support the Lebanese armed forces in their essential and indispensable role for the protection, security and stability of Lebanon. The final statement, read by Italian Defense Minister, also stressed the firm support for Ukraine and expressed concerns about the intensification of military cooperation between China and Russia, as well as the development of North Korea's nuclear program. Speaking to the news personalities after the meeting, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin reiterated U.S.'s stand for Israel to scale back some of its strike in and around the Lebanese capital. He further urged Israel to opt for negotiations.
I say the same thing that I said about Gaza and continue to say. The numbers of civilian casualties have been far too high. We'd like to see Israel scale back on some of the strikes that it's taking, especially in and around Beirut. And we'd like to see things transition to some sort of negotiation that would allow civilians on both sides of the border to return to their homes. And that's the point that I'll continue to make with Minister Gallant. And I think, yes, he does take on my input.
Besides West Asia, the G7 defense ministers also talked about support for Ukraine's NATO membership. The ministers said that the major democracies support Ukraine's irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. The statement also mentioned that G7 shall continue to provide assistance to Ukraine, including military assistance in the short and long term in its conflict with Russia. The summit was the first session in the history of G7 dedicated to defense in the ministerial meetings program. Italy holds the 2024 chair of the group, which also includes the US, Canada, Britain, France, Germany and Japan. An update on ground situation of Ukraine now. Ukraine launched a series of drones targeting Moscow and western Russia after Russia launched an air attack on Kyiv and Odessa. Kyiv has often said in the past that its air attacks target infrastructure key to Russia's conflict efforts and are a response to Moscow's continued air attacks on Ukraine. While Russian officials often do not disclose full extent of damage inflicted by the drone attacks, especially on military transport or energy infrastructure. And now let's quickly take a look at other stories making news around the globe. In Indonesia, former General Prabowo Subianto sworn in as the president, seeking a more prominent position on the global stage for world's most populous nation. The 73-year-old was accused of rights abuses during his time in the military. He took the oath at the parliament to officially succeed outgoing leader Joko Widodo. In France, dozens of protesters gathered outside the court in Avignon to show their support for the feminist icon Gisèle Pelicot. Her ex-husband is on a trial for enlisting dozens of strangers to rape her. The 71-year-old woman has gained support ever since the trial of Dominique Pelicot and dozens others opened last month. In the U.S. state of Georgia, at least 7 people were killed after part of a boat dock collapsed, sending at least 20 into the Atlantic waters off the coast. Search for the missing people is underway after the incident that happened during a celebration of Sapelo Island's tiny Gulayihe community of black slave descendants. Australian fans of Liam Payne held a small vigil on Sunday in Sydney, the venue where boy band One Direction once performed to a sold-out concert. Payne, who shot to global fame with boy band One Direction, was found dead on Wednesday. Investigations is currently underway, and they are now working to reconstruct Payne's final hour after saying that the singer's death is likely occurred after some kind of episode due to substance abuse. Time to take a short break, but still to come on the other side. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi set to visit Russia for the 16th BRICS summit taking place in Kazan. And in cricket, India versus New Zealand resumes test on final day after a brief delay. After the break, an interesting report on spooky tales of Halloween this season.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back after that short break. You're watching DD India Live. Now, India's President Draupadi Murmu returned to New Delhi after successful state visits to Algeria, Mauritania and Malawi, setting new milestones in India-Africa relationship. On the final day of her visit to the East African nation of Malawi, President Draupadi Murmu visited Sri Radhakrishna Temple at Lilongwe. The temple is an important place of cultural and religious significance for the Indian diaspora residing in Malawi and is a major center for community gathering. Later, she also visited the famous Malawi lake. Lake Malawi, also known as Nyasa or Nyasa, is the southernmost large lakes in Africa and is the fourth largest lake by volume in the world. It is also the third deepest freshwater lake in the world. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to visit Russia for the 16th BRICS summit taking place in Kazan. The summit, themed strengthening multilateralism for just global development and security, will serve as a crucial platform for leaders to address key global challenges. During his visit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also expected to engage in bilateral meetings with his counterparts from BRICS member countries and invited leaders. Here's more.
BRICS, an important grouping, brings together the major emerging economies from the world. This year, the 16th BRICS summit is being held in Kazan, Russia. BRICS countries have been the main engines of global economic growth over the years. On Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin highlighted similar points.
This year, the average rate of BRICS economic growth is projected at 4%. This is greater than both G7's growth rate, which is only 1.7%, and global growth rate, which is 3.2%. This is a forecast.
President Putin echoed Prime Minister Narendra Modi's stance on BRICS, that the grouping is not anti-Western, but rather non-Western.
BRICS never was meant to against anyone. The Indian Prime Minister put it aptly of late. He has said that BRICS is not an anti-Western group, it's just a non-Western group. The BRICS does not counterpose itself to anyone. It is a group of nations that work in concert and have shared values and shared goals of development and take each other's interests.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Russia from 22nd to 23rd October 2024 to attend this summit. This year's theme for the summit is Strengthening Multilateralism for Just Global Development and Security. Leaders are expected to discuss key global issues. Ahead of the summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin praised Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his efforts towards paving a solution to the Ukraine war.
Our mediation is wanted, we will gladly work with the colleagues. Same refers to our friends. In particular, I mean the Prime Minister Modi. While talking with His Excellency over the phone, each time he raises this matter and expresses his considerations, and we are grateful to him for that.
The association now includes 10 countries: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates joined BRICS as new full members. BRICS Plus, as the organization has been informally called since its expansion, now accounts for 37.3% of world GDP. Siddharth Bharadwaj's report for DD India.
Indian Army and the Jammu and Kashmir Police today launched a joint anti-infiltration operation along the line of control in Baramulla Zuri. Based on intelligence inputs regarding an infiltration bid, troops spotted suspicious activity and challenged that resulted in terrorists opening indiscriminate fire. Vigilant troops responded with effective fire. Operation is currently under progress. Time now to quickly take a look at other stories making news across the country. Building on India's neighbourhood first policy and Sagar outlook, Indian Navy's ship INS Kalpeni arrived in Colombo on Saturday. The ship has brought in essential technical support tools which will be handed over to Sri Lanka Navy. In addition to taking in replenishment, the ship's crew will visit places of importance in and around Colombo. Amid the decreasing temperature, air quality in the capital city of Delhi was marked poor on Sunday morning. Meteorological conditions are highly unfavorable for effective dispersion of pollutants. Air quality of Mumbai, however, was marked good, while Pune and Ahmedabad got a satisfactory pass. In Chhattisgarh, the 77-day-long Grand Festival of Bastar, the Shehra, concluded on Saturday. It accounts as the longest festival in India and the world. Goddess Danteshwari Devi is worshipped, who is believed to hold immense significance for tribal communities. Preparations are underway in UP's Ayodhya to organize the 8th Deepotsav on 30th of October. The event will feature a stunning display of using 500 drones adorned with colourful lights, captivating the sky. The show is scheduled to last for 15 minutes and will be a key highlight of the main Deepotsav festivities, showcasing the capabilities of drones made in India. And now moving on to the sporting action, New Zealand secured first test victory after 36 years on Indian soil. Rachin Ravindra and Will Young are confidently dealing in boundaries and taking New Zealand ahead in the game. Despite losing 2 wickets, 2 down, New Zealand are in a comfortable position in the chase of 107. Earlier on day 4, New Zealand was 0-0 after skipper Tom Latham and Devin Conway came out to bat, but only 4 balls were bowled before the bad light forced the play off. In women's cricket, South Africa is all set to clash with New Zealand in the final of the ICC T20 Cricket World Cup. South Africa avenged their last year's defeat in Newlands with a convincing 8-wicket victory over defending champions Australia in the first semi-final in Dubai. Meanwhile, New Zealand have reached the final after 14 years after defeating West Indies by 8 runs in a nail-biting semi-final in Sharjah on Friday. The Sophie Devine-led Kiwis will be looking forward to continue their momentum and lift the title when they face Laura Wolvatot-led South African in Sunday's final showdown. Moving on, Halloween, the festival of remembering and respecting the people who are dead, is the widely celebrated spooky night on the eve of All Saints' Day. The religious observants have evolved toward dress-up fancy play with representation of eerie costumes and uncanny movements. Let's watch a report by DD India's Ragini Sudhir Chaure on how the world is gearing up to celebrate the spooky night of Halloween this season.
The Mexican-coloured folk art, London's Halloween to Kew, Japan train to Busan, and Cosmic Con with furry dogs in the States. This Halloween season serves more than culture on the platter. The Halloween will be celebrated on October 31st this year. However, its spooky presence has already hit the road. Japan opted a quirkiest way of celebrating Halloween, with trains becoming set for actors to play zombies. It is said to be world's first haunted house experience on a running Shinkansen. Spanning 2.5 hours from Tokyo to Osaka, was inspired by hit 2016 South Korean action horror movie Train to Busan. Mexico saw a brightly colored folk art sculptures representing fantastical creatures of Alebrijes. The colorful parade celebrates the cycle of life and death and sees many festival goers paint their faces. The Alebrijes are statues representing imaginary beings mixing several animals, fantastic or real, and they come from the region of Oaxaca in Mexico. New York City, on the other hand, hosted its highly anticipated Comic-Con at the Havas Center in the Midtown Manhattan. Fans participated wearing elaborate costumes representing their favorite comic book heroes, movie icons, and video game characters. Meanwhile, in London's Kew Gardens, a Halloween at Kew was launched earlier this week. It is a new light trail featuring a haunted pumpkin farm and a spider web tunnel. Cities around the world are gearing up for celebrating Halloween, and the season is expecting far more than just fun. Ragini Sudhir Chore for DD India.
And that's all for this edition of DD India Live. But do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code to download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Deepika, and from all of us here in New Delhi, thank you so much for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.